Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
Barbara and I are wrapping up our 4th year of partnership on Nightlight. 5th year will continue to be quirky, thought-provoking, uplifting, and more of the new perspectives that an educated audience expects to hear. Let's see. The first Nightlight Tandem show was for the 2018 Mothman Festival. Tonight's show is also on the Mothman and the return of the Mothman Festival. It's the best show in town, in the state, the Ohio River Valley. Come down and see all of us. Steve Ward is one of our guests, and you can see him at the festival, emceeing at the State Theater. You can find him at the Mothman Museum on weekends, too. And if that is still not enough Steve for you, you can listen to his High Strangeness Factor podcast and Mac Maloney's Military X-Files. And we also have Jaci and Bill Kousoulas, and they will be 2 of the many captivating speakers. Jaci is doing her own business now, and she is also co-author along with Bill of Bridging the Tragedy, which should be available very soon. And Bill has a PhD in psychology. So, welcome everyone. How are you guys doing tonight?
Excellent. Wow. Good, Mark. Thanks. How are you?
Good. Oh, I'm doing fine. Just sitting here trying to get through this show with no computer and a really bad case of poison ivy. But this is great after the last 2 years with the Mothman Festivals being canceled. It is back on track for September 17th and 18th?
I believe so. It's always the 3rd weekend in September, however that falls.
Yeah, September 17th and 18th in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Just follow the throngs of people heading to the State Theater. Steve, so since you were a guest with us, Steve and Bill were guests last year when we were talking about it, about the same time last year. What's some of the latest news from Point Pleasant? Is there something being caught on the moth cam? Any other new research?
When I was working, when I worked at the museum, oftentimes I'll talk to people in the museum part and so forth, and ask them, is this their first time here, and whether or not it was a planned destination or if they were just driving by. But I also go out by the statue, and I'll ask, because there's people that go there that, one of their group has to take the picture, so I will offer to take the picture of the entire group. Well, there is this 24/7 moth cam up there. A friend of mine was snapping pictures of me, spying on me, I guess, from the moth cam. So that's a lot of fun. Although I will tell people that if you're trying to see somebody on the moth cam, it does have quite a delay. So you can make a gesture of some sort, and it will take a while to catch up. You could probably be out of town by the time your gesture is registered on the camera. But one thing is, I believe this year the speakers will be at the River Museum. They're rebuilding the River Museum after the fire that happened a few years ago. I think the State Theater has gotten to the point where it's a little bit too old and not quite sufficient to house the speakers. So there's that. Now I don't know all the speakers are going to be there. Of course, Bill and Jaci are going to be there. Nick Redfern, Ken Gerhard, Lyle Blackburn, and I know that there are several others. I haven't checked the website for a while.
Yeah, I know Ron Lanham from Wild and Weird West Virginia podcast will be one of the speakers. I should be back in the saddle as one of the tour guides on Saturday night in the dreaded TNT area where the Mothman was seen originally. Okay, cool. So,
and that's where we have 3 tractors. We line up at the farm museum out there, right across the road from where the old North Power Plant used to stand, where the Mothman was seen by the Scarberries and the Mallets. And so you got the 3 tractors, you got the 3 carts, Jeff Walmsley, Brittany Sayer, and myself. Jeff has the only proper hayride with actual bales of hay. I have what I call one of the old man carts with nice, comfortable seats. And we take people into the dreaded TNT area, which is creepy without anything additional. But, you will probably be accosted by the Men in Black, which are more like the Keystone Cops than the real Men in Black, and pretty much a guaranteed flyover of the Mothman. So it's just a lot of fun, and it's really great to be able to do it again.
Okay, and what is going on with the new business across the street from the Mothman Museum?
The trading, is it trading post or whatever? That's why they just have everything in there. They're actually going to move it across the street into another building. They're going to expand the Mothman Museum a little bit, but also they're taking the trading post across the street, so it'll be on the same side of the street. And if you go a little further south, you'll hit another one of Jeff's stores called Bunker 304. And that has a lot of old LPs and music-related stuff and other T-shirts. It's another store. It's a little bit kind of a throwback to Jeff's original stores. He had Criminal Records, where he would sell, LPs and cassettes and CDs back in the old days. But so it's really his efforts and his family's efforts have really revitalized Main Street in Point Pleasant.
Cool. Okay. So, and when people are going to see the speakers, they don't go to the State Theater. Where is the venue?
It's just a little further down the street, not far from where the Mothman statue is. I think it's just past Bunker 304. If you're on the same side of the street as the Mothman Museum, you just keep going a little bit south, and you'll see this brand new building that they put up, and that's where they're going to have the speakers. It's going to be a nice venue.
Okay, it's towards the 2 Endwee.
Yes, exactly.
Park. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Getting my bearings straight for that one. Okay, so
and later, if you want, we can talk a little bit about some of the stuff they can expect at the festival. But there's other sites to see where the bridge used to be, and the great flood wall and all that. If you want to get to that later, there's quite a bit to enjoy there, whether you're there during the festival or not. Okay.
And memorial. Okay. Yeah, I will be sure to bring that up before the end of the show. And we can talk a little bit to Jaci and Bill about, you live outside of the Ohio Valley, but how did you become so interested in the Mothman legend in Point Pleasant?
Sure, and thanks for that. Hey, before we get rolling with that, I just wanted to thank Steve for clarifying the venue for the speakers, because when you mentioned the State Theater, I about had a heart attack. I've heard nightmares about how hot it gets in there. I'm a really hot-blooded kind of guy. I'd much rather be in this river, the new River Museum. I'm assuming it's got to be air-conditioned, right?
I certainly hope so.
Yeah.
I'm sure it will be.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw that on Jeff's page, and I thought, oh, this is going to be really nice because we're not going to have to sweat to death now. But to answer your question, really, Mark, back in probably 2003, I saw the movie, the Mothman Prophecies movie, DVD, checked that out, was really interested in the storyline, and at the end of it, it says that this was based upon real events that happened in Point Pleasant, West Virginia in 1967, pertaining specifically to the bridge collapse. So I got interested in the whole phenomenon, started studying John Keel's work, followed up on other authors who have written similar things, and then really back in 2016, Jackie said, hey, we need to go on a vacation. Where would you like to go? And I said, well, how about Point Pleasant? And she said, if you toss the Serpent Mound in there with that, we'll do it. So we live in Chicagoland, so it's a bit of a haul for us. But long story short, we went to Point Pleasant the first time in 2016. We met Carolyn Harris and a guy by the name of Mark Griffith. We became quick friends with them and just fell in love with the people of Point Pleasant, and we've been back every year since then.
Okay. And your book is at the printers now. It should be out, available very soon.
Well, actually, Mark, I've ordered a copy, and Amazon claims it'll be here Thursday.
Oh, okay. That's even better.
Well, I have a production partner who handled all that business, and what did you upload the file yesterday to Amazon?
Yeah.
And within 24 hours, it was released. So we were super excited. We kind of felt like we needed to rush it to the press because we really wanted to be able to bring some copies out to the festival. But yeah, it's out and about. It's on Amazon, and we're really excited.
Okay, cool. I want to come down and get an autographed copy.
We can do that.
No extra charge, right?
No extra charge.
Of course not.
Only for you to speak.
I can handle it.
Okay, so I'm looking forward to reading it. Know a little bit about. Remember some of your the research from last year. I think you have something terrific going on with showing how there's this horrible tragedy, but Mason Countians are resilient and came back from this horrible event. I don't know how small towns really do recover from the loss of so many lives all of a sudden. So that's what I want to focus a lot of tonight's show on, is what happened. How are some of these patterns similar to other paranormal and other traumatic events that are frequently covered on these late night talk shows, and what helped the people of Point Pleasant to move forward to a productive future. So maybe let's just start with some of the generalities about the bridge. I'm sure most people remember last year's discussion on that. So Bill or Jackie, do you want to talk a little bit about the bridge?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and basically, I mean, when we first had the concept for the book, it took a little while to kind of bring it all together. We knew that we wanted to do something that involved psychology, because that's what my education and my background is in. Mm-hmm. And then second, we wanted to do something with the whole Mothman phenomenon, because that's where our passion lies. And so when we met, I mentioned Carolyn Harris. We met her in 2016, and we just really, really were drawn to her. And I had told Jackie that I was very interested in seeing if I could interview her. I knew, because she had lost her young son in the bridge disaster, that it was something that was taboo. She didn't want to talk about that. I was kind of hoping, against hope, that perhaps I could maybe get her to talk about it and maybe write a story about her. But sadly, she passed away before we had a chance to do that, and it was really sad for us both, because even though we only knew her for a week, we felt like we knew her for our whole lifetime. She was just that kind of person. So what we decided we wanted to do over the course of, I guess, the next few years, we kept going back to Point Pleasant, spending time with Jeff, getting to know more people in the community. We met Steve a couple of years ago, and we just continued to keep on getting more and more connected to the community. And it seemed like something we'd like to do for the community, because they embraced us the way that they did. When you go to Point, you feel like you don't know any strangers. Everybody's just so outgoing. And we decided, this bridge disaster was such a horrible thing. A lot of the research that I did for my degrees was based around the concept of post-traumatic growth. It's the good things we get as a result of going through the tough circumstances we face in life. And so after some time of kind of kicking this around and thinking about it, we thought, gosh, that bridge disaster was an extremely traumatic thing that happened in Point Pleasant and in the Ohio River Valley. I know good has come out of this, and you can see kind of on the surface some of the good things that came out of it. But we needed to hear in the experience of people who had been through that, in the community, what it was like for them, what happened, and how their lives changed. And then we had a couple of folks, out of the 11 that we interviewed, there were only a couple of them that really had any paranormal experiences at all. And so most of the study is based around the growth that happened in the community as a result of the bridge disaster, but there were also some people who had paranormal experiences that also helped them to grow individually too. So we found all kinds of neat things that came from the study. We had sought out to find dimensions of post-traumatic growth. It's a psychological construct, and we ended up identifying 16 key things that arose from the study that showed how the community developed, people had better spiritual experiences, et cetera. It just went on, and we were able to learn so much good stuff from so many good people. It was a very rewarding study to be a part of.
Okay. As I was going through several books to prepare for tonight's show, one of the senses in John Keel's The Mothman Prophecies goes, for one long year in my life had been intertwined with the lives of the people of Point Pleasant. I had been led into relationships and events that seemed to follow a structured pattern beyond my control, even beyond my understanding. I think a lot of research today in trauma, it does focus on patterns, and we've also covered it with patterns of serial killers as well. When Mark Olshaker's been a guest with us, but in that passage, Keel's talking about more of there being a structured pattern to the paranormal, but what are some of the traits, like spirituality, that seems to be typical of post-traumatic growth. So what are some of the other human structured patterns that emerged from such a terrible event? Jackie, what? All right. Who wants to field that question?
You can as well. Did you want to say something?
Well, you go ahead and say what you're going to say.
Well, okay. What I was just going to say was one that comes to mind for me is it's the dimension of what they call perspective taking. We take a look at different things that happen in life, and depending upon where we're standing, it might appear differently to each one of us. And because we're all different individuals coming from our own backgrounds and experiences and ways of interacting with other people and in the world in general, we have a different viewpoint upon things. Now, one of the things that's in post-traumatic growth theory is that what happens is that a paradigm shift occurs because these events that happen, like the Silver Bridge collapse, it's a matter of, most of the people we interviewed never thought that bridge was going to collapse. I think there were two ladies who we did talk to who had been over the bridge before it had collapsed, within a couple of days. And they were saying, this bridge is going to fall. It's all shaky and everything. And the other one says, oh, it's not going to fall. This bridge has been here forever. It's going to last forever, blah, blah, blah. But when the bridge collapsed, a number of the people that we talked to, Denny Bellamy, for one, he participated in our study. He's the Mason County Visitors Bureau and Convention Center executive director. He said one of the things that happens when something like this occurs in your life is that something like this can happen. They say it doesn't happen here, but it did happen here. I mean, it shatters the foundation of what we're looking at, how we're living our lives, and it forces us to take a step back and, reflect on reality and see it from a different perspective than we did before an event like this happened. That's just one of the things that we were able to uncover.
Okay, Jackie, did you want to add another or just extend Bill's comment?
Personal development was another thing that came from the study. The way people were able to grow from the experience, and also a sense of community, how they held on to each other, and they still do. Point Pleasant people, Susan Thayer especially talked about that, and how whenever there is a family or a person in need in Point Pleasant, everybody works together to fulfill the need.
Mm-hmm. That seems to be an Appalachian trait.
Yeah.
It's interesting, Mark, that obviously we know that West Virginia is in Appalachia, but when I was working on my dissertation, there was an article that I used in the literature review for the dissertation, and it was about the resilience of Appalachian people and how they, how they really respond to trauma. And we were able to utilize that foundational article in what we called our literature review in the book that just came out today, also to be able to talk about the different traits that people in Appalachia have. There's hardiness. I mean, these are not people to be trifled with. If the luck is down, and a lot of times it is, they still pick themselves back up again. They develop community. They stand together. They do the things they need to, like Jackie said, to come to the needs of the folks that have to have, what they have to get by in life. They're there for them. So, hardiness, resilience, perseverance, those are all things that presented from the study.
And Steve mentioned the memorial of the location of the bridge. Steve, could do a quick description of the memorial. Let people know where they can see that, since we're on that subject.
It's just if you're standing in front of the Mothman Museum, it's only a block and a half north. It was 6th Street, where the bridge used to go over to Ohio from Point Pleasant. And right now there's a memorial there, and then there on the street, on the sidewalk, the 46 names of the people that perished on the bridge are there. And if you look a little bit further along the flood wall, they have this beautiful mural of the way the bridge used to look with the perspective as it went over to Ohio. And I should mention briefly that I have new digs. I am a displaced Michigander deep in the Ohio Valley in West by God, Virginia. I live a stone's throw from 6th Street, the very route where the Scarberries and the Mallets fled the Mothman, and the mighty Ohio River, and the Mason-Dixon line for that matter. So I have experienced the community that Bill and Jackie were talking about. I've got great neighbors, great support from the people around me. So I'm a Point Pleasant resident now, and I never dreamed I'd actually be living here. But that's where you can go see. And then on the other side of the flood wall, there's another little monument, and there's even a monument across the river at a little rest area around. So, but there's so much more to see down there, whether you're at the festival or not.
Okay. Bill and Jackie, in Mothman Prophecies, Keel talks about, let me get the right term, the lacunal amnesia. It's loss of memory of specific incidents or moments in time. When we've had several guests on, we've gotten into like Betty and Barney Hill's loss of time when they returned to their apartments after the abduction. Now, might be an extension of that idea, but with your interviews with people and maybe research into just trauma, does Keel's statement about traumatic events seems to have an impact on call abilities or memory?
Yeah, one of the people that we interviewed, she was 18 at the time, the bridge went down, and she lost her sister-in-law on the bridge. And she was traumatized. She was the youngest child in their home, and all of a sudden she was taking on this death of her sister-in-law and watching her brother go through such grief, standing by the river waiting and waiting and waiting for the body to be pulled up. And the little kids were placed in the home with her then, her niece and nephew. And after the interview was nearly over, Bill was kind of like reiterating what she had said, and he said, you know, I'm hearing you say this, and, you know, something on the order that, you know, how would I be feeling about this? And then it came to her that she literally had like a near-death experience and was rushed to the hospital, that she had gone into such a deep shock, and she had totally blocked that from her memory and did not even recall it until after we had talked to her about this.
Yeah, we were literally almost done with the interview, and like Jackie said, I just was kind of speaking back to her some of the things I heard her saying and reframing it in my own context of how I would feel if that happened, just like Jackie just said. She said, you know, now that I think about it, I dropped dead. Basically, she didn't use those words, but she had fainted, and she was unconscious from fainting, and she had flatlined. So they had to take her to the hospital and basically resuscitate her. And she's got a great sense of humor. We stayed in touch with her, I think, probably as much as anybody else that we have from the study. She's just wonderful. We're looking forward to seeing her again at the festival. But, yeah, she actually, I don't think it really correlates exactly with the missing time phenomenon that maybe Keel talks about, but it certainly was a suppressed memory, that severe trauma of losing, you know, her family member and all these things happening, and just being 18 years old and trying to process all this was too much for her system at the time. She went into shock.
Yeah. Okay. In Donnie Sargent and Jeff Walmsley's book, Mothman: The Facts Behind the Legend, there are, few places where Linda Scarberry talks about on page 26, none of us have ever been the same after the first sighting. There's some passages about we just can't forget. Things like that. And I just found that as we do more of these shows with paranormal experiencers, memory frequently plays a role in the story that they're telling us over the 2 hours.
There was another person that we interviewed also for the study who had multiple paranormal experiences in 66 and 67. And we kind of honed in on one of them for the study and just kind of discussed that. And hers was more of a UFO sighting that she had. And, as you guys are as well versed with the Mothman Prophecies as we are, that UFOs were just as prevalent, if not more so, than appearances of Mothman during that time frame. And she had seen a UFO, and she kind of not disappeared like from the face of the earth or what have you, but this was like during daytime. And she looked up at it for what she thought was a couple of minutes, and then she went back home, and her mom said, "Where have you been?" And she said, "Well, I was just walking, up and down the street," or because they live out like what they call a holler out there in West Virginia, kind of a neighborhood, but it's different from those Northern Illinois neighborhoods that we live in. And she said, "I was just out and about walking, Mom, and what's the big deal?" She says, "You've been gone for 3 hours." So she absolutely had the classic missing time thing at that point in time as well, and then was haunted by various, visions of similar phenomena throughout her life after that, too. She's had multiple occurrences of different things since even the 60s and 70s.
But also, some people like Marcella Bennett, I believe it was, said that after she had her sighting, she's the one that went out to the TNT area with her brother they were going to scratch on the windows and try and scare some people with the stories of the Mothman. But she was holding her infant daughter at the time when she saw this thing and collapsed. But she said that she wouldn't drive at night afterwards for years. Several of the people had this really affected them, and also a lot of strange aspects about this Mothman, which, by the way, was about 6 or 7 feet tall, somewhat man-like, a 10-foot wingspan, and red glowing eyes. Keel, and also a Swedish researcher named Franzen, who followed him in there a couple of years later, discovered that a large number of the people that saw the Mothman were also experiencing poltergeist phenomena after they went home. I don't know how long these outbreaks took, but that's got to be pretty unnerving to see things moving around your house, after seeing this creature or apparition. So it really had quite an effect on people.
Okay. So with the first sighting, Donnie and Jeff's book covers that they're driving 100 miles an hour down Route 62, where there's like 3 times the Mothman hit the top of the car. Okay. That's pretty hair-raising events in itself. But we were just covering someone who had some experiences, paranormal experiences, stopped driving at night. When we've had Wallace Wagner as a guest, and Steve, I know you've had Michael Carter on your show, to talk about his book Initiation.
Right.
Michael, discusses after the experience, someone is, or the experiencer is probably going to have some sudden behavioral changes, changes in a career. He when he was a guest with us, he spoke about really maybe the only thing he ever really read was the sports section of the newspaper, and right after the experience, he starts reading all these like world creation mythology type stories, or you're delving into all these sacred texts. It kind of brings us back to someone suddenly stopped driving at night. Betty and Barney Hill were working more in civil rights. So after the Mothman appearances and or the bridge collapse, were there people having some sudden changes in interests or careers? I'm just kind of looking for this pattern that keeps reappearing throughout our shows.
I would say, Mark, a couple of the people that we interviewed did notice that they had some abilities that they didn't realize that they had after having the experiences that they did. Artistic, written, really good students in school, The lady that I was talking about that had the experience with the UFO went on to become a medical intuitive. I mean, somebody who was actually able to diagnose your his physical conditions face to face, and that's one thing that you kind of, it's easy to be skeptical about. But we were on a Zoom meeting with her. I think it was the first or perhaps the second time that we'd ever had a conversation with her. I think it was the first. And as we were chatting, I told her that I was having some trouble with my back. And I have, Steve and I think have talked about this in front of the Ohio River just visiting. I have degenerative disc disease, and I have a bulging disc in my neck, and it gives me all kinds of nerve problems. It's just maddening. And as I was sitting on the Zoom meeting with her, she said to me, you've got something going on. She said, it's got something to do with your back, but I think it's a little different than that. And she used the word diverticulitis. Now, I was misdiagnosed with diverticulitis a couple of years before that. And I thought, gosh, I hope she's wrong, because that wasn't a very healthy or fun time in my life. 3 days later, I experienced my very first ambulance ride to the emergency room at our local hospital for a related issue. It wasn't diverticulitis, but it was gastrointestinal. And I mean, that was a real wake-up call. I mean, this chick is legit. she knows what she's talking. But she wasn't doing that, obviously before she had her experience. Now, granted, her experience was at a young age, but she's just very advanced in a lot of ways, very, very in tune with things, and I would call her psychic.
She had developed total recall as a child after her experiences, which is really something, and she still, I think, has it pretty strong.
Yeah, she's really something special.
So, how is total recall being defined? Is it an enhanced memory?
Well, she said that they took a group of the students from the school into rooms, gave them assignments, and she remembered what her assignment was, but I don't remember what it was. But they had given her some different books and information, and she was supposed to go read this information and come back when they called her into the room to report it. And when she came back doing her presentation, she said that one of the women stopped her and looked at the man beside him and said, "My God, she's got total recall."
Yeah, she spit it out verbatim, what she had studied. It was something to do with world history, if I remember correctly, that she had never studied before. And she literally went into this room, read it for a few minutes or 45 minutes or whatever, came back and spit the whole thing back out verbatim.
And I want to go on record as saying I don't have any of that, but go ahead.
Me neither. None of us.
But even in Donnie and Jeff's book, on page 31, they do describe Mary Hire as it just completely took over her life. Just all this stuff that started happening in 1966. She was not immune to it either.
She got totally absorbed in it, as you just mentioned her and how it kind of encompassed her lives. I mean, look at us. I mean, look at the, 1, 2, 3, 5 of us sitting around talking about this right now.
And I've been following this since the first flyover in November of 1966. I was in junior high, and it hit that's the sighting, Scarberries and the Mallets. It hit the wire services and went all over the world. And here we all are still. I mean, you can't, Bill and Jackie, you can't imagine stepping away from this, can you? I mean,
no.
This
just would never happen.
Well, and I just caught myself in a math error. There are only 4 of us here, right?
Well, yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not a big movie buff. I'm not one that sits still for a whole lot of anything, really, except for playing video games on my iPad and writing stuff. But, I don't watch a whole lot of TV. So for a movie that I watched, which was a good movie, not a great movie, but a good movie that I watched almost 20 years ago, and here we are 20 years into the future, and this is pretty much my life. Yeah, I mean, that's really something.
And in a related topic to how experiencers or experiencers are impacted. Dug up another book, try to link it to one of the passages in Michael's initiation. But I'm reading from Peter Levine's In an Unspoken Voice, and he writes, in a lifetime of working with traumatized individuals, I have been struck by the intrinsic and wedded relationship between trauma and spirituality. From my earliest experiences with clients suffering from a daunting array of crippling symptoms, I have been privileged to witness profound and authentic transformations. Dr. Levine's observations seem very characteristic with what, just say an author, an experiencer and researcher like Michael Carter wrote about. With you have the event and there seems to be some kind of spiritual connection that follows. What
we found a lot of that. We found a lot of that in our study. Just in my research in trauma in general, even predating the book that we're talking about tonight, that I think sometimes people get beat down so badly. We talk about it changes the paradigm. The way that you deal with life, your subjective reality is altered forever. The bridge collapse being one event that we can call traumatic, but it could also be, maybe the sudden death of a spouse, or it could be a tornado that devastates a small town like Fairdale, Illinois, which is 15 miles away from us, that experienced an F4 that was 1 mile per hour lower than an F5 tornado in a little 1,000-person town, devastated the entire town. How do we recover from that? And you see all these stories of, community coming together, people learning a deeper sense of spirituality, whether that's a faith in God or faith in a divine spirit or what that might be, or just having the ability to see beyond certain circumstances and know that there's a guiding light somewhere. Let's just shoot for that guiding light and to have that inner spirituality. That was a big one. That was a big thing that presented from our study as well, too. I'd say out of the 11 people that we interviewed, 3 or 4 of them really spoke about their faith in God as being very, very central to who they were.
And back to Donnie and Jeff's Mothman book, when Linda, I think it was all 4 or the 2 couples wrote out their made the sheriff's reports, and they reproduced in the book, as well as Steve. Are they still on display?
The books, or you mean the original transcripts?
The hand.
Yes.
They're okay. And
when you first walk into the museum part, they're all up there, the original handwriting. And like you say, the book, you're one of the books that Jeff wrote, he's reproduced all that stuff along with a lot of other articles and history of what happened at that time.
Yeah, and Linda writes, they all wanted to, we all agree we'd like to talk to a minister about it. That's right after coming down Route 62 with the Mothman hovering over the car at 100 miles an hour. That seems to be an indication that this pattern seems to be frequently appearing after some event where there is some kind of like heightened spirituality.
May I interject something here, Mark?
Sure.
Jeff told me that he found there was a nurse that worked at I think it was the Pleasant Valley Hospital at that time. She told Jeff that 2 women were admitted that night to be treated for shock. And so Jeff didn't know about that. So he went to Linda Scarberry when, of course, she was still with us. We lost her a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And she said, yes, she and Mary Mallett were treated for shock at the hospital. That's something that's not really known, very well known. But that's obviously these ladies were not pulling a hoax or faking something if they actually were treated for shock that night.
Yeah, that's a big deal. That's news to me, too. I'd not heard that, Steve.
Right. That's Jeff spent a lot of time with Linda, even went back out to where the old North Power Plant stood, and she took him step by step through what happened that night.
It had to be difficult for her.
Yes. It was several years before Jeff was trying to get her to come to the Mothman Festival for years to talk to people. And I think her first time was my first year there in 2006. So, yes, and also the ridicule that went on at the time. Merle Partridge got it, too, the people that reported these things. And a lady that I was talking to recently outside the museum said, hey, back in those days, you just did not talk about this stuff, whether you experienced it or not. People would have just thought you're crazy, and you just kept your mouth shut.
That's a good point too. In our time that we spent with Benny Bellamy, what an entertainer that guy is. I mean, we had such a good time with him. He actually informally spoke to us an hour before we even got the cameras rolling, and then after that had us back to his property, and we sat out there with him for 3 or 4 hours. I mean, we basically spent the whole day with the guy. But he told us, people like Linda, other people who experienced this. He used the word crushed. He said they crushed those people. The ridicule, you're on drugs, you don't know. I mean, and then whether that was coming specifically from different, people within the community, or if maybe that was from the quote unquote men in black, or whoever was trying to police the area or what have you. In any event, you saw this thing, you talked about this thing, they basically cut you out at the knees.
It seems like so many people have made these understood that what people are, the experiencers are really talking about is asking for help, trying to heal from what happened. It's far more accepted today than 55 years ago.
And that's one of the things too, that there were several people who we talked to who said that, there was no counseling available back then. You didn't talk about these things. Mm-hmm. One of the ladies said, hey, this is West Virginia. You pull yourself up by the bootstraps. That's just the way that it is. You don't admit that something's going on with you mentally, psychologically, that there's some kind of trouble, some kind of trauma. You got to be tougher than that, and that's just the way things were back then, and to some degree still are. But when we asked, if there were counseling available at the time, the overwhelming majority said that they don't think that it would have helped, or that they wouldn't have chosen it. There were one or two that would have been interested, but for the most part, they felt that they got that through their church or through their families or through the community.
Well, some of the literature, it's really the only people who were diagnosed with that kind of problem were just people coming back from whatever World War II or Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And Mothman Prophecies, towards the end, about the last chapter of the book, since we're just covering shock on page 290. Keel does write about on both sides of the river, people who had been waiting in the lines to drive over the bridge were crying. Some had to be treated for shock. And then on the preceding page, he writes, Howard Boggs found himself at the bottom of the river outside his car. He says, I don't know how I got out of the car or how I got to the surface, but all at once I was on top and caught hold of something like a cotton ball. There are back to the memory issues, the disorientation of it approaching darkness. I don't. How deep's the river? Probably like 12, 13 feet deep. That would have to just be petrifying, where it's like everything happens so fast, and you're no longer in your car. You're outside of your car at the bottom of the river. Like, do you know which way to swim to get to the surface? That would have to be just a traumatic experience in itself after a 50-foot fall.
I might have mentioned this last time, Mark, but I talked at the 50-year remembrance ceremony that weekend. I met Bill Edmondson, who was a truck driver going from the West Virginia side to the Ohio side with material going to a tire plant. And his partner was in the cab, never made it out. But he talked about, in reality, the bridge took 30 to 40 seconds to collapse, unlike the way it's portrayed at the end of the movie, where Richard Gere has all kinds of time to warn people. But the bridge tilted, everything, it went into the river. He was forced through the passenger window, right arm first. Of course, this is December 15th. The windows would be rolled up. And he got out through the window, and the current started to pull him up. But his pants were actually dragging behind him. But it didn't leave him because of the 1960s pant cuffs. You know how it just and he was almost to the surface, and then some debris or something caught his pants and started to pull him back under. And so, but he finally kicked free. He hung on to some of the insulation or whatever it was that he was transporting with his left arm, because his right arm was useless. And a tugboat captain saw him and picked him up out of the river, just probably moments before he would have died of hypothermia. He was there to pay his respects to those that had died. And, the thought in his head has been all these years, why did I survive, in this terrible tragedy, and so many innocent people did not?
Okay.
We'll talk about life eating. I mean, at that point, Denny Bellamy likes to talk, and I've heard him in multiple documentaries, but also in our interview with him, he talked about how people were just at the ultimate wrong place at the wrong time. But
right.
Look at the flip side. like you just talked about, Steve, with Bill Edmondson, the ultimate right place. I mean, he went down and somehow he came back up and defied death a couple different times. And talk about giving your life a new meaning. That's a great story.
And this is such a, I would be working in Michigan at Electrical Wholesaler, wearing one of my Mothman T-shirts or making deliveries. A lot of people came in and said that was a reference point. I used to go down to vacation there with my family. We crossed that bridge 2 weeks earlier. There's all kinds of people that had a story, some kind of link to the Silver Bridge collapse.
Mm-hmm.
Jaci and Bill, in Steve's example, the example he just gave, it sounds a little bit like survivor's guilt. Did you encounter that with some of your interviewees?
Actually, we really didn't, because the people who we interviewed weren't people who were on the bridge. They were people who were close to the disaster as it happened, or part of the community during the time frame of what happened there. But to take your question in just a slightly different direction, maybe a little more closer to what we were just talking about a moment ago with Bill Edmondson, is that when we placed our ad with Beth Surgent, she actually put it on the front page of the Point Pleasant Register and the Gallup Police satellite newspaper to that and throughout that area. The first call that we received was from a gentleman by the name of Jimmy Wedge. And if that name rings a bell, I don't know if it does, but if it rings a bell, Jimmy was the coach of the Point Pleasant men's or boys basketball team the night the bridge collapsed. And he was in his coaching debut when this happened. And he actually, before the game began, he knew the bridge was down. But it was his inaugural game as the varsity coach, and his mom was coming to the game. And what he didn't know is his dad, who was the vice president of an organization that was based in another state, had flown back and was going to surprise him at the game as well, too. Mom and Dad were on the bridge. Mom and Dad both died. So Jimmy was 24, I believe, when the bridge collapsed. And he had already had his own family. He was married, he had a small child, but he was such a tremendous interview. I mean, by far, arguably, nobody lost more than Jimmy Wedge did when the bridge collapsed, with Mom and Dad both dying in that thing. But he went on to become the mayor of Point Pleasant. He went on to become a West Virginia state legislator, and at the age of 79, he was the oldest of all of our participants in the study. And he's a self-made guy. He said the time that he had with his mom and dad, he got a foundation for how to live life, and he learned, if you work hard and just do the best you can, give it the old college try, you can be successful. And he talk about a composed, confident, humble. He doesn't see himself as humble. He says, I'm maybe a little cocky. I think I gained that from the bridge collapse. But confident, successful guy. And he was a really entertaining and fun interview. And I just had so much. I get chills just even talking about it, because when he called me and I got him on the phone, he said, I lost both my mom and dad in the bridge collapse. And I immediately thought, oh, my goodness, this is going to be somebody who's going to probably be, bursting in tears. And he was probably in high school or younger when this happened, but he was an adult. And he was so composed, and just such a wonderful interview. We had such a good time talking to Jimmy.
Okay.
One of the things was, and it really struck me, was that he was grateful that he was 25 and that he wasn't younger. Because if he had been younger, he doesn't know that he could have handled it. He didn't, he said, if these people that were younger and they lost parents and they lost siblings and grandparents and stuff on the bridge, and it would be so much harder. And he was just so grateful that he was old enough to be able to understand it somewhat and handle it.
Yeah, that makes sense. your use of the word grateful, maybe that takes us back to what Bill said early on in our talk of some of the key traits was the perspective taking, and being 25, may help to put that in the event into perspective better than what we're saying. To say someone 14.
And that's exactly what he said. I mean, almost verbatim. I mean, he said that for somebody to have lost the parents the way that he did, to be at that age when you're so instrumental and your parents are everything and they represent stability, they represent guidance, they represent family, and for that to be taken at such a young age when you really, really need your parents, even though when you're 14 you don't think you do, you really do. I mean, he was really very open about that. And like Jackie had said, grateful that he was older when it happened. And one of the neat things about him, giving back was another quality, that came up in the study as well. He talked about how at some point in time he should have gotten into counseling. And when he said that, when he made that comment, I thought what he meant was he should have checked into counseling and undergone therapy. But what he meant was he should have actually been a counselor because of the experience that he had and what he'd gone through, that he could be a reference point for somebody else as they're going through these difficult times. And one of the neat things that he had said was that when you're with somebody, he said, all you got to do is you got to stand with them. He says, you don't got to give them advice. You don't got to this. You don't got to that. He says, you need to be there. They'll tell you what they need from you if they trust you. You just have to give them enough room to trust. And that's something that the lady that we talked about who had the medical intuitive abilities also worked as a therapist. She said the same thing. When people are going through trauma, be there for them. Don't encourage them to talk about it. I mean, but be available. And if they want to talk about it, they will, but don't push them.
Well, and Bill, the example you were just talking about with the the coach could have gone on to be a psychologist and worked with other people. That is one of the traits that Michael Carter talks about in his initiation, is where people want to change the world for the better, and global warming, or something like that. Betty and Barney got into more of the civil rights activism in the 60s. There's people just frequently become more involved in like global awareness type events, and it's not all just centered on themselves. Michael wrote about going almost like being an apostle and going out to help other people. Steve, does that sound like what you remember from Michael's book, or what you and Michael discussed?
Yeah, it's been a while since I did the interview and read it, but yeah, a lot of people were gained a positive motivation to extend themselves and to they just would find different goals and things that they wanted to do as a result. Some people seem to have very negative experiences from what we might, I guess we would call the abduction experience. But it's encouraging that some people are moved to do great things with their life afterwards.
when people are attending the festival, if they want to walk in the footsteps where so many of these events happened, a lot of them are just happen in a small area downtown. And how far is it out to the TNT area?
It's about, I'm thinking 7 or 8 miles.
Oh, okay.
North of town. And, of course, that's where a lot of UFOs were seen. The Mothman was seen. It was funny because Jeff Wamsley's mom was in the museum one day, and she saw one of the mannequins dressed up like the Men in Black. And she asked him, what is that? And and Jeff told her. And she said, I saw them back in the 60s. And he said, you know how long I've been doing this, and you're just telling me this now? And he asked, where were you seeing them? And she said, outside Mary Hyre's office.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say, is Mary's office were several scenes from the Mothman Prophecies book?
Yes.
Is that the building is kind of down there by the State Theater?
It's actually right on 6th Street. One of the white buildings there on 6th Street was her office. So the bridge collapsed just down the street from her.
Okay, so people, if they want to walk around, read the Mothman Prophecies and see some of the locations, they can do that downtown as well as driving out to the 7 or 8 miles to the TNT area. It's we're not talking like huge distances. Everything is pretty much compact in.
Well, there is if they go across the Barton Jones Bridge across the Kanawha River, mm-hmm. down toward Galapagos Ferry. Around that area, you'll find the Chief Cornstalk hunting grounds, and you can go back in there on some of those very, very narrow roads. You go a little further, you'll hit Galapagos Ferry, and that's where, if you go take Crab Creek Road and turn left on Horselick Road, you'll come, I won't say what road it is, but you'll come to a particular very bad road that goes up a hill. That was one of the places that John Keel and Mary Hyre and others used to go to watch the strange lights go over. So a few miles south of Point Pleasant, down around Galapagos Ferry, back in the hollers, is where a lot of activity took place. But the different parts of the TNT area, if you go to the southern end, is Camp Conley Road, and that's about the border, I think, of the TNT area. But that's where the Lillies lived, and they had all kinds of bizarre activity, bedroom invaders, strange lights going overhead. So it's a little bigger than just the downtown area. But just also to mention, there's an incredible amount of history there as well that you can, just by walking around town, you can experience. And of course, if you go down to Tolinde Park, you'll come together where the waters mingle. And that was the name of the column that Mary Hyre wrote, Where the Waters Mingle, where she covered Mothman, UFO sightings, and the Men in Black reports.
Okay. And you, at the state park at the end of town, you do have the really big Battle of Point Pleasant monument, and
Chief Cornstalk is buried there also.
Okay, and Bill wanted to talk a little bit about the Chief Cornstalk legend. I think that's interesting as well. So, Bill, what what are some of the insights that you want to bring to that discussion?
Well, with the Chief Cornstalk legend, I mean, Chief Cornstalk was a historical figure. He was the principal chief of the Shawnee and the Mingo tribes, and he was really trying to do what he could to prevent the settlers from pushing any further west, into Ohio and such. And Camp Randolph was the outpost that the settlers had, and there was skirmish. Obviously, battle skirmishes were going on. Cornstalk really wanted to bring peace. I mean, he would rather, no more bloodshed. Let's just stop. Let's try to negotiate and such. But in the process of heading to Camp Randolph, there was an incident where a couple of natives had killed a couple of settlers in some type of a skirmish. And after this had happened, then the settlers got wind of it. And when Cornstalk and his son traveled to Camp Randolph, they were basically taken prisoner. And then shortly thereafter, they were executed. And I mean, the legend has it that there was a curse that Cornstalk had laid out upon the land and said this land will not prosper for 200 years. All this kind of taken a little bit of, taking that with a grain of salt and such. And our first trip to Point Pleasant in 2016 at Carolyn's Cafe, we met a lady by the name of Lynn Robinson, who was a seventh fire descendant of Chief Cornstalk. And we asked her, we said, hey, Lynn, what do you think of this whole legend about the curse of Chief Cornstalk? She said, absolutely not. Didn't happen. No native would ever curse the land. The land is sacred to them. We didn't own the land. We're stewards of the land. That didn't happen. And so, interestingly enough, she had the first time that she told us where the TNT area was, and Jackie and I traveled out there with her half-brother Mark Griffith, who's also in our book. She sent me out there with a cigarette box where she had basically crumbled a cigarette, and the tobacco had kind of fallen into the bottom of the box. And she said, take this out there, she said, because this is basically, a traditional, Indian burial ground, and sprinkle some of the tobacco to the north, to the east, to the south, to the west. And then they'll, the native spirits will basically be appeased by that because they'll see that you're bringing them a gift. And so we did that and kind of went about our business on our first trip out there to the TNT. But, there was something else I was going to mention about the Curse of Cornstalk, and that's what Denny told us. Yeah. Go ahead and tell them about that.
Denny said that there was a school, an old school being torn down, and they tore down a wall, and behind the wall was a closet that had been covered up. And when they opened the closet, there was all kinds of old material in there. And one of the things they found in there were a couple copies of the Cornstalk play, and it was the Curse of Cornstalk. And the curse was literally written out in that play, and that's where that came from.
Word for word. I think was it 20s?
I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I think it was the 1920s. And it was definitely some artistic license was added to the Chief Cornstalk curse.
Right. And they said that he was shot at point blank, and there would have been no way that he would even had time to mumble any type of anything out of his mouth, let alone a full-blown curse. So
then he actually walked back into another room of his facility and came back out with the play. We actually have a picture of it. We snapped a picture of him basically presenting it to us, saying, "Here's where the curse came from."
That's really cool.
Yeah.
If anybody had a right to utter a curse, it would have been Chief Cornstalk, who was a peacemaker and betrayed and murdered. But apparently that didn't happen at all.
It doesn't sound like it. Not from the things that we've been told.
Okay, so you the legend makes for an interesting story, but we're just getting into the history. Like Jackie said, if you're just shot at point blank range, probably don't have the time to utter, some kind of curse. Okay, so forensics is at play as we recreate many of these events. Let's see. When we talk about all these kinds of things, the Chief Cornstalk's curse, or the legend of the Mothman, applied to other urban legends as well. We do get the detractors, kind of come out of the woodworks and explain that, okay, being shot at point blank range, really would have prevented the curse from happening, or Chief Cornstalk from saying the curse. Okay, we can look at like the Sandhill crane and get the scientists kind of come out of the woodwork to be more authoritarian about this Mothman thing. It just didn't happen. They saw the Sandhill crane or the huge barn owl that was shot, and that explains everything, or it's all just swamp gas. This might be a good question for Bill. So, why do we get, when we have a story like this, why do the authorities just come out of the woodwork to make sure that we believe their version and not the just locals' story of this is what I saw?
Well, I think the first thing.
Oh, go ahead, Bill.
Go ahead, Steve. You're good.
I'm just going to mention briefly. I remember Keel giving the in quotes scientists a rough time. I think it was in Strange Creatures from Time and Space. He talks about Type A scientists and Type B scientists, and one of them is the local scientist or the professor or whatever at a high school, and the other is the one that's in academia. And he gave a hilarious example of the one that when they thought they discovered the coelacanth, which supposedly was extinct for 65 million years. This one scientist derided it and said, well, this is it's not possible, and it's a shallow water fish, and blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, 10 years later, they found it. Same scientist said, well, we've always expected this. After all, it is a shallow water fish, and, of course, it's a deep water fish. But, yes, Keel had a lot of fun poking at fun, but it's I'd like to hear what Bill has to say, but it's sort of like the, how when UFO reports are in the news or whatever, sometimes the news broadcast, the local news, or even the national news would end with a UFO report and present it with a chuckle factor. There's something. It seems like there's something. Maybe it's changing a little now, but it seems like there's something. The way humans are wired to explain away or ignore some of the stuff with laughter. It's just part of the human condition, I think.
Well, you get the Fife Symington press conference right after the Phoenix Lights.
Right.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about there, Mark. I mean, when the guy comes out with the alien head on, and basically is trying to make light of the entire, phenomena that was happening there. And really, I mean, he came back and stepped back from that and apologized for doing that because he knew, at that point in time, they tried to debunk it the best that they could, but there was really something to that was tangible. But to go back to your question from a couple minutes ago, the two things that I thought of was the first one is the mind doesn't do well tolerating ambiguity. Most people like to have answers for things. We tend to kind of thrive. I mean, when I say we collectively, those of us that are on this call right now, collectively thrive upon the unknown and get into possibilities and extreme possibilities. It's very, very entertaining. And there's a big portion of society that's interested in that. But then we have our concrete thinkers. They don't tolerate that ambiguity. They don't like things that are abstract. They like to be able to put names on things. They like to be able to label situations and occurrences and have a tangible reason for why things work. I mean, they have to have their arms around things that way. And I would say that the science that I tend to follow is more on the qualitative end rather than quantitative, not necessarily numbers and statistics and evidence that's numerical, but it's more experiential. It's tell me what your experience is. How did this affect you? What were your thoughts? Our entire book was based upon qualitative science. It's about the experiencers, their perceptions, and the commonalities that they found and the way that they experienced the things that they did. I'm not sure if I answered your question directly, but I think two different camps, concrete and abstract. I need an answer. I'm open to possibilities.
No, that makes sense. I understand where you're going with it. I'm sure the audience does too. I just wanted to throw that possibility out there about the sandhill crane. It's just as soon as someone says something out of the ordinary or outside the usual realms of reality, it's just someone comes in to quickly debunk you. You weren't there. You didn't see what I saw. You just you're just paid by someone to just say that I'm just making up something. It happens more and more frequently in today's world.
One of the folks that we interviewed has absolutely no belief in Mothman whatsoever. I mean, he was one of the 11 that just really, he's like, it didn't happen. There's nothing to it. And you'll see when you read his interview, he'll jump out at you because those are his thoughts. But he's also the same guy that took us out to the TNT area and was a little spooked in being out there. So, I mean, which one is it? Did it not happen? Are you afraid that it could happen? Where are you really coming from? It's funny. He's a good friend of ours today, but it's kind of funny, that dichotomy, in the way that he acted and the things that he said.
Well, I think that was because when he was a young boy and moved to Point Pleasant, an older lady told him he shouldn't be wandering on the streets just checking out Point Pleasant, and an older lady told him that he needed to be careful because of Mothman, the bird. And when he was being interviewed, he literally had a look of terror on his face, and he's like, why would you tell a little kid that? That's not something you tell a little kid. So I think that partly he had to believe his entire life that it wasn't true because it was so scary for him when he first moved there.
And let's face it, the TNT area is creepy in the daytime. And if you come on a hayride on Saturday night in the dark, it's especially creepy.
I want to be in that old man ride. That's where I want to be, the comfortable one.
Yeah, nice, comfortable while you're living in abject terror. But it's not too terrifying. The flyover of the Mothman is they light up his eyes with battery power. He comes down a wire near the old acid plant, and they have a sound effect that they have confiscated. I can't say where it's from because they haven't paid any royalties, and I don't want them incarcerated or fined before the festival.
Maybe afterwards.
Maybe afterwards, yeah.
So, speaking of sound effects, are there still props from the movie, the Mothman Prophecies, and the episodes where Jeff appears on the History Channel talking about the Mothman legend?
Yeah, along one wall in the museum is all dedicated to some movie props. Now, some of the props might be a little lame, but some are very cool, including, if you remember the film, where Richard Gere's wife is drawing illustrations of what she saw that night. Those original sketches are there. And also there's, what are there, maybe 3 or 4 videos, DVDs going all at the same time with different documentaries of the Mothman. And you'll see Jeff in many of them being interviewed. And the one that I'm in, they aren't showing, so I don't know what, I need some equal time. Although I have to say, the Mothman of Point Pleasant, which they show right in the front room there, I'm in there for about 3 seconds. You'll see, if you see Tom Urey and the camera moving, you'll see the back of my head for about 2 or 3 seconds, and you could tell that I was going to be a star.
Well, they got the front of your face for the next one.
Yeah, that's true, but that's the one they're not showing. So I'm going to have to go on strike or something.
Bring it, Steve, and they'll never notice. It's just something running.
Yeah. So you have an appearance like Brian Seach had in the actual Mothman movie.
Well, in the sequel that Small Town Monsters did to the Mothman of Point Pleasant, it's called the Mothman Legacy. And the Mothman Legacy actually, according to Seth Breedlove, applies to Jeff Walmsley and his daughter Ashley, because they're the ones that have continued the legacy with all the things that they've done. Well, I have. It's a really nicely done DVD, and it was great to be part of it. You'll see me occasionally as a talking head pontificating about the Mothman. So, but also, we mentioned the film. Refresh my memory. The name of the gentleman that wrote the screenplay. His name escapes me at the moment.
Richard Haddam?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's very interesting to hear him being interviewed, because you get kind of an idea of what was in his head and what he tried to do with the screenplay. And I appreciated the film even more after hearing him. So he's definitely worth hearing in the Mothman Legacy.
He is. He does a great job in that. You guys both do.
Well, thank you.
And obviously the museum is very busy.
Oh yeah.
During the festival, but you can still enjoy the festival. Maybe come back another time when you can have more time to leisurely go through the museum. But what are some other artifacts besides the Hollywood props that are there, and the handwritten letters that are featured in Donnie and Jeff's book? I think there's some of John Keel's type letters to many of the Point Pleasant residents.
Well, there's an incredible amount of articles that cover the history of all the events that went on. There's even the article about Bill Edmondson, although they get his name wrong. They call him Bill Edmonds, that had been pulled out of the river. Mm-hmm. There's even a Monopoly board of Point Pleasant. I mean, Jeff's got everything there. He's got, there's a tribute to Carolyn Harris. There's a little room off to the side where they run one of the documentaries, and they've taken parts of her Harris's Steakhouse, the stools, the wall that was there, and as a tribute to her. So you can, it's kind of like a little bit like walking into a restaurant. There is, there's all kinds of Mothman statues and things. There's several boards there. There's one that talks about that first major sighting. There's one that's dedicated to Carolyn Harris, and it's just it will take you a long time to go through. I recommend that if you're going to go to the Mothman Festival, get there Friday, because you can get into the museum then. During the festival itself, Saturday and Sunday, the line just goes on forever. So, but it is fun to go there off season, so to speak. But there is a up and down Main Street, you're going to get all the usual suspects: food, T-shirts, bouncy houses, a zip line. In the vacant lot, they've got a Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. They've got Ghostbusters running all over the place. And the street that's perpendicular to Main Street, where the Mothman statue is, that's where the speakers, and I'm sure you'll find Bill and Jaci there with their books. The speakers are usually there with all their wares. And it's, as Brittany Sayre says, she's one of the ladies that does the tour, the hayride, the Mothman Festival is the happiest place on earth.
Yeah, we're really looking forward to it. This will be the first time that Jaci and I have been to an official Mothman Festival. We went last year with a bunch of diehards, but that wasn't the real deal, was it?
No, I think I met you guys at one of the non-Mothman festivals. Was that maybe not? I'm trying to remember what. But I've been down with some people the last couple of years during festival time, even though there wasn't an official festival.
Yeah, last year we were there with you, Steve.
That's right. Okay.
And it was the year before that we met you, because we actually met you because Jeff had told us to stick around for an extra day because Small Town Monsters was going to be at the museum debuting or signing, copies of their new movie. And I like to just say that you Shanghaied us, and we never did get to meet those guys. We did meet Seth later on because he came to Chicago, and I had a small piece in a documentary he did there like a year later. But, yeah, that was fun. That was a fun day. That's where we met.
That was a blast. That was just so much fun.
So, what is in Bunker 304?
It is. It's sort of a. Jeff used to have a couple stores called Criminal Records, where he sold LPs and what's that?
Oh, so that's where you could get all that in Bunker 304, and
it's got a lot of stuff. Yeah, T-shirts. It's got a lot of stuff that's kind of rock music related, but it's not exclusive. It's just another nice addition to Jeff's line of stores. So definitely worth checking out. There are some shirts there that you can't get in the Mothman Museum or the trading company. But it's just definitely worth checking out.
Jaci and Bill, when you were down, staying there, did you stay at the Low Hotel?
Well, the last time we went during last year's Mothman Festival, we stayed in Ripley.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
Well, we could have stayed at the Low because everybody canceled their reservations, but when we made the reservation, Ripley was the closest for us to stay.
Yeah, I've heard that hotel was haunted. I was just wondering if you had any insights into the Lowe's Hotel.
We've heard bits and pieces of it. Funny story. when we went to Point Pleasant on our trip. I think it was in 19. It was November 11th, 11/11, and we'd scheduled just having lunch with Jeff and hanging out for a little bit. And we showed up, and we didn't realize he had told us that the History Channel was going to be in town. The people from Prometheus were doing a video there, and there was a lady by the name of Linda Sigmund who was being interviewed right out front of the Mothman Museum as we walked up, and it was dreary and it was raining. It was a nasty day, but yeah, I mean, we went there and just kind of hung out, and I just totally lost my train of thought. What were we just talking about? Jeff took us to the Low Hotel. Yeah. He walked us in, and because he's a celebrity there in town, he's able to do pretty much whatever he wants to do. And so he walked us into the Low Hotel and took us around and showed us all over the place. And he said, "You guys ought to buy this place." And he started trying to talk us into buying the place. I'm thinking, that's great, Jeff. I don't think that we have Walmsley money. And I think this is a little out of our price range, and we live 500 miles away from here. It would be neat to have, but, we have heard the bits and pieces about, certain hauntings and different apparitions showing up. And I think there's a little boy that people talk about rides a big wheel or something like that,
a tricycle, because Jeff asked us when we were on the third floor if we heard that, and then he told us about the story. And there's also a Captain Jim, isn't that Captain Jim that is seen in the rooms there?
Yes, I know that story because I know the lady that saw him, and that was in 2006. Robin Bellamy, no relation to Denny. She wrote a self-published book on the apparitions in the Low Hotel. But it was during the festival, and she went and walked into her room. The door was unlocked, and she saw a man standing by the window looking out over the river. And she thought, well, just somebody got lost at the, no big deal. Somebody got turned around at the festival. And he said something about his boat or his ship was coming in tomorrow. And then she noticed that his legs didn't go all the way to the floor. So she started backing up to get a hold of, she had her camcorder there. And, of course, by the time she got a hold of her camcorder, he was gone. Well, later on, when she was doing research for the book, she actually found a photograph of this apparition that she saw that night. So I don't know if they used to sell her book at the Low, but so that was pretty interesting. And also, Rosemary Ellen Guiley used to, when she was there one time, and she was working near the mezzanine, actually in the main lobby, I guess. She looked up. If you look up, there's these sort of openings in the wall where the next floor is. She looked up and saw a woman in white, and just very briefly, and then she was gone. So I know two people that have seen apparitions there. Not me. I'd never see an apparition.
So was Robin's sighting of this captain, was he a riverboat captain?
I think that was what it was. I'm not absolutely sure, but I'm pretty sure he was a riverboat captain.
Okay. Steve, you're a Keelian scholar. What did Keel say about some of these apparitions, or what have you read in all of your extensive readings about why would he be in that hotel room overlooking the river? Was he staying there, like the ship comes in the next day and he was to pilot it down to
possibly
Louisville or something?
The Low's been there forever, so I wouldn't know exactly why the apparition would show up there. But he may have had a connection to the Low Hotel. I mean, it's so old. But it's very difficult to condense Keel into a couple paragraphs. But he kind of shied away from the a strictly physical nuts and bolts aspect to all this. He talked about window areas where these things seem to. He was trying to come to grips with why these creatures and these objects seem to come in and out of nowhere, and sometimes they they change shape and so forth. They don't seem to operate under physical law. And also, he wondered, why is it that there are so many varieties of these craft or whatever? So he started thinking in terms of window areas, but then he moved into something that gets really out there, where he thought that perhaps some of these manifestations were actually transmogrifications of energy, that perhaps they were temporal or paraphysical, and maybe even suggested perhaps that we co-create some of these images or things with our belief system. They seem to, he talked about paranormal mimicry and so forth. Like I say, not easy to condense Keel into a couple of paragraphs, but he didn't reject the notion that all these creatures were paraphysical. Again, in Strange Creatures from Time and Space, he talks about type A and type B creatures, and he thought some of them were actually unknown physical creatures that had not been discovered yet. But others didn't seem to, the Bigfoot prints will disappear in the middle of nowhere out in the Sierra Nevadas. They're just even the Mothman was a paradox. The Mothman didn't have a wingspan that would probably lift something that tall. It didn't always flap its wings. Some people that saw it in close proximity thought it gave off some kind of a humming noise, like perhaps something mechanical. And again, you have the situation where people saw this thing and experienced poltergeist phenomena. So he's definitely worth reading. He was probably a century ahead of anybody else, and he's endlessly fascinating.
He's still ahead of a lot of the people that are researching today. No question about it. I love that whole concept of the transmogrification of energy and the co-creation, between percipient and the phenomena, that you're really kind of not necessarily manufacturing, but it's almost like your psychic energy is engaging the psi-plasma or whatever you want to call it to be able to perceive these different manifestations. I've never had any kind of paranormal phenomena. Jackie has had a number of them, and she has some very intuitive and psychic tendencies. I don't have that. I'm more fascinated by this. I love talking about it. I love researching it, but I've never had any of those experiences.
He also used the term ultra-terrestrial, which was, he said it was he used it as kind of a literary device. He thought that a lot of whatever this was likely a natural condition of the planet. We didn't necessarily have to look off-world, but it also, the ultra-terrestrial thing kind of implied another dimension or whatever, for lack of a better term. But he wasn't, he wasn't static in his thinking, but he was also, I don't think he was always definitive. It wasn't clear whether this energy or this phenomena was conscious, a separate consciousness, or whether it was just something natural to the planet that just reacted and created these images in a certain way. This is part of the natural environment.
Are most of those books at the gift shop?
Several of them are. You mentioned Jeff's book. Jeff has two books. The other one is called Mothman Behind the Red Eyes. They're excellent. There's one or two Keel anthologies there. There's maybe 6 or 8 available, which have gathered together a lot of his articles over the several decades. The only thing I would caution about that is some of the editorial comments, I think, are off base. And I just caution people to, I don't think Keel needs to be annotated. And unfortunately, in some of these anthologies, there are editorial comments that break in and suggest things like Intred Cold was a mobster or something like that, or I don't know, just crazy stuff. But, the basic ones, the Mothman Prophecies, the sequel, the Eighth Tower. Now, and the one that really, I don't remember, Bill, if we talked about Trojan Horse, but that's the book that turned my paranormal world upside down. I came kicking and screaming. I thought, No. UFOs are from Alpha Centauri or in Mars. Don't give me this ultra terrestrial stuff. But that is the book that really changed my thinking. And while I was in therapy trying to recover from that, I read Jacques Vallée's Past Wisdom Magonia, and I'm afraid I've never looked back.
Operation Trojan Horse is really a tour de force. And Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that book what originally was conceived of as the article for Playboy that Keel was supposed to write?
Yes. He was commissioned to write an article for Playboy, and he was doing that's when he was gathering together in all these newspaper clipping services and making all these statistical analyses. And I'm sure that a large part of Trojan Horse was the result of that research.
Mm-hmm. It's a good read. It's a very good read.
Yeah, it's just it's mind-boggling. It's very different from the Mothman Prophecies. And another thing about Brent Raines has written a great book on John Keel. John Keel, the man, the myths, and the ongoing mysteries. In there, Keel told him that if he had written everything that happened in Point Pleasant, it could easily fill 6 books. And as it was, the book that he wrote, they cut half of it out. Now, some of that was salvaged into the 8th Tower. But then there's also a couple really, really bizarre books. The Big Breakthrough and the Big Blackout, which I think came from Doug Skinner's website. Doug Skinner has a lot of Keel's original stuff. And some of that is like the unedited version of the Mothman Prophecies. And so there's some repetition there, but it's very interesting because you get into John Keel's head, where he's especially dealing with this lady named Jay Perro, and he's wondering, is she hoaxing? Is she making this stuff up? And so you really get into him analyzing this, and he's thinking, well, she knows things that she couldn't possibly know. So there's just I recommend anything by Keel, and I just think that he's just fascinating.
Okay.
I would too, that the Big Blackout is really, it's almost like it runs parallel to the Mothman Prophecies. In a lot of ways, it was Keel's field notes that were going on during that time. But so much of it's dedicated to the New York stuff that was happening.
Yes, right.
They only do, in a couple of chapters in the Mothman Prophecies, but it's front and center in that book, and it's just weird stuff.
Yes, and it's no wonder that John Keel became so paranoid, and he wrote the chapter, "Paranoiacs are made, not born."
Well,
and it's no wonder he edited some of that out in the Mothman Prophecies, or at least somebody did.
Okay.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a much longer book, but I guess we've got it in a few different volumes with the 8th Power, because the 8th Power really was a big chunk of what was in the Mothman Prophecies originally as well, and it really speaks to the ultra-terrestrial theory, the whole concept of us being on a different frequency from perhaps some of these other occurrences, these different manifestations of energy and such. Really neat stuff.
Okay, and we have like 4 minutes or so left. I just wanted to remind people about you can walk from the to ND or is that how you say and we park along the flood wall, and you do have gorgeous views of the river, and it's nice to watch the sunset.
Bob
down
Roach
there
has several other sculptures that he's done. The same man that did the Mothman statue. He's got Daniel Boone, Mad Ann Bailey, Chief Cornstalk, and a general whose name I can't remember. But it's just the whole area is just very, very well done. Worth checking out.
Mm-hmm. And that then there's the we discussed the memorial as well. That's more at the north end of town.
It's a block and a half up from the Mothman Museum.
Yeah,
it's 6th Street.
Yeah, it's really most everything we've discussed is all just right there downtown. It's just several blocks. It's really not exhaustive walking.
No,
it's really a family friendly day out. It's free, except for buying books and stuff like that and T-shirts. But just you just walk around and may have to pay for parking, but it's easy to get around. You really can't get lost. There's good food. It's all great day out for the family.
Absolutely.
And so in the last couple minutes, Jackie, where can people get your book?
It's at Mothman Festival first, and then it's also available on Amazon.
Okay, and what's the title?
Bridging the Tragedy, Silver Linings in the Mysterious Ohio River Valley.
There you go. Okay, and Steve, what do you have going on? Are you?
My show's been on hiatus for a while, The High Strangeness Factor, on the Paranormal UK radio network, but it should be up and running again before too long. Mac Maloney's Military X-Files is a correspondent on the same network. I want to tell people that get to the festival early Saturday morning, go to the information booth, and buy your tickets for the hayride, because they will sell out. That's the only thing that costs a few bucks. It will be, you can check it off your bucket list, even if it wasn't on your bucket list.
Okay.
Where's it going to be located?
It'll be right there by the where the Mothman statue is, probably on Main Street, down a little bit. It'll be easy to find. It'll be very centrally located.
Thank you.
Okay. Bill, do you have any concluding comments? A benediction for tonight's show.
I really appreciate you having us on the show. Mark, thanks for doing that. And I was just going to say, Steve, we've got our books shipping directly to the Mothman Museum. If you get your hands on them before we do, please leave a few for us.
Yes, and I will, when I see them, I will photograph them and put them up on Facebook.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're just about out of time. And
no, you're out of time, Mark. It's time to say goodnight.
All right. I'll see you guys in about 3 weeks. Thank you, everyone. Talk to you soon.